Chat from Ben Bowman. That's a great name, Ben Bowman. Some of these guys have great names. It was like Nathaniel Stallings, I think was one of the names. I was like, oh my goodness, he should be like, I'm pretty sure Nathaniel Stallings was one of the Knights of the Round Table with King Arthur. All right, here we go. Should we be dimming lights during worship? Great question. No. What we know from Ephesians and Colossians, right? So I don't want to be overly legalistic about this, about exactly our methods in worship, right? So there are, what's the theological terms? It's the substance of worship and the circumstances of worship. There are other terms, but I'll just use those. Substance of our worship and the circumstances of worship, right? So I adhere to the regulative principle of worship. Normative principle of worship means as long as the Bible doesn't forbid it, meaning as long as it's not explicitly forbidden in Scripture, it's free game to do in Lord's Day worship with the gathering of the saints. Worship being the whole thing, all right? Not just worship through song, but worship through prayer, worship through preaching, worship through the sacraments, the Lord's Supper, and baptism. Lord's Day worship. So normative principle says as long as it's not forbidden, explicitly forbidden in Scripture, it's free game. Regulative principle of worship, it's not saying regular, but regulated, means that we can only do that which the Bible prescribes. Right? So not just if it's not forbidden, but it must be commanded. It must be commanded. All right. So with the regulative principle of worship, even with that, which is a stricter policy of worship, that primarily deals with the substance of our worship, not the circumstances. All right. So to give you an example, substance of our worship would be the ordinary means of grace. Worship, Lord's Day worship and the gathering of the saints is comprised of the ordinary means of grace being rightly administered by biblically qualified men. Okay, so that would include publicly preaching the word, publicly praying the word, publicly singing the word, and publicly seeing, S-E-E-I-N-G, seeing the word in the only two images that the Lord has actually allowed for us, prescribed to us, which is baptism and the Lord's Supper. Baptism and the Lord's Supper. That's the ordinary means of grace, rightly administered on the Lord's Day to the gathered people, the Lord's people gathered together, by those who are biblically qualified to do so and have been called and ordained to do so. That's the substance of our worship. So what I mean is you can't say, hey, we're not going to do the Lord's Supper anymore. We're going to do this other thing. Or we're not going to do preaching anymore. We're just on the Lord's Day, we're going to gather together and we're going to break up into groups and we're going to just do discussion. No, that's messing with, that's not the mode. That's the substance, right? Now, the circumstances of our worship could be like where you're going to meet. Right? We're going to meet in this building or we're going to meet outside, right? When you're going to meet, right? Is church at 9:30 a.m. or is it at 10:30, right? There's room there. So the regular principle of worship, which is the stricter principle, the normative allows for anything that the Bible doesn't forbid. I would be regulative. That's within the Reformed tradition. I would encourage others to do the same. But even within the regular principle of worship, that has to do primarily with the substance of our worship, not the circumstances of our worship. So then the question is, lighting, right? Does that belong to the circumstances or substance of our worship? And I would say substance. I would say by proxy, it involves substance. And this is why Colossians and Ephesians say that in our worship, there's a vertical aspect that we are addressing God with praise, but there is also a horizontal aspect where we address one another. We are stirring up one another. We are addressing one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. And here are two practical circumstances required for the substance, the command, the prescription to address one another. You got to be able to hear them and you got to be able to see them. Meaning it can't be elevation, can't be Hillsong, it can't be Bethel, right? What do? Two things. They do a lot of things they shouldn't do, but two primary things. Lights down low, I can't see one another. Music turned up loud, I can't hear. And if I can't hear the congregation and I can't see the congregation, then I cannot address one another, the congregation, with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Wait, real quick, before you go, do me a favor. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the bell so you'll be notified with all our new content as it comes out on a daily basis. And if you're willing to support this ministry, you can do so by going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. Thanks so much. God bless.